Learn how to create a new HTML elements dynamically. In this lesson, we'll stop using alert method and instead create a new listing element. Although it won't appear on the page yet, we will successfully create this in JavaScript. Now, if you look at where we are in this our to-do list application, you will notice that we've added a couple of things to our script tag. And you will notice explicitly that on the web page, the last task that was typed into the input box is still being retained, even after we have been able to use alert method to see the contents. Now, if you click add task, you can see we have seen the contents inside this alert method, but yet it still won't go away from our input box. So in this lesson, we are actually going to look at how we can create a new list item. And we are going to be doing that with JavaScript. Even though it is not going to be, it won't appear on the page yet. It is not yet going to be added to our page. But we'll show how you can successfully do that in JavaScript. And the reason is because not every HTML element has to be written inside your HTML file. There are times where you might need new elements, and you can actually use JavaScript to create new elements whenever your application needs them. It does not necessarily mean that all HTML elements has to be written inside your HTML file. So let's move on. And what does that mean? It simply implies that in a situation where we might have a breakdown, for example, because we are building something smaller, and for ease of access is the reason why I'm combining JavaScript with HTML. In a large application, there's definitely going to be separation of concern, whereby HTML is going to be alone inside its own file, JavaScript is going to be alone inside its own file, and the CSS, which is our style sheet, is also going to be alone inside its own file. Now, as we are moving on, if we eventually get to a place where our code is, getting much more, we definitely will have to switch into that method, into that separation of concern, very soon. But for now, let's keep this as it is now. So, moving into our script section, before we add any code, I want you to think about our to-do list app in this manner. Now, currently, we actually don't know how many tasks a user will had. You never can tell whether a user will add just one task, two tasks, three, or multiple. For example, one user might add 3 tasks, another might add 100 tasks. So instead of us now writing the listing elements 100 times in our HTML, JavaScript can help us to create one at a time whenever the user clicks the add task button. So instead of us manually saying, okay, I want the list item to be stored here, and then we'll have like maybe 100 of these. If a user create like maybe task 1 or whatever. Now imagine a user creates 3 of these, it is very manageable. But imagine when a user needs to create like 100 tasks. Instead of us to be putting this manually, we can actually use JavaScript to help us create it whenever there is a need for it. And that is the essence of what we want to actually look at inside this lesson. So let's move into our script tag. And I'm going to take this out. Let me take this out as well so that our code can be clean. So now that I have this, let's move ahead. Let me add the comments and say create a new list item, since that is the topic of this lesson. So in JavaScript, how do you create a new list item? You make use of a create element method. So the way we are going to create a new list item is this. Let's make a variable and let's call it li to represent list item. Then we'll call on this method in JavaScript document.create elements. Create element. And if you look at it, you can see it in an HTML document. The document.create element method creates the HTML element specified by local name or an HTML or no element if local name isn't recognized. So it actually means that you can use this method to create HTML elements. So I'll click on it, and in our case, so if you want to create a P tag, you pass it in. If you want to create an H tag, you pass it in. But for the purpose of this lesson, we want to create a listing tag. So I'll pass it in like this. And now that I've done this, now let's now take our user task and then put it inside the list item. So how are we going to do that? Well, let me add another comment. Put the user task inside the list item. Our list item is this li that we have here. So the way you are going to do that is you are going to need another method called the text content. The text content is a property in JavaScript. So in order to put the user task inside it, so I will call on this variable. I'll call text content. Now, text content, I'll click on it and I'll set this to task. So whatever thing that is written as our task, it will be saved as a text content inside our listing item. Once I have this, then let's go ahead to actually see if this is actually going to work. So let me now use console.log in order to output our listing. So we'll go ahead now, open our console, and let's inspect to see if our task is going to be added for real. So let's clear this and now click add task. Now you can see one listing item. Let's open it. Even though it is actually not showing anything, but you can see a gigantic properties that is attached to it. So let me click on it again. You can see. So this is how you can actually create a new list item. Even though our list item is actually not showing any tags, but we are creating it right inside our console. So that is what we have just been able to do with the creation of a new list item. Now, when we click this add tags button, we can see that what JavaScript does is that JavaScript will create a brand new list item using this method, the create element method. You can see we have already passed what you want it to create inside it, which is the listed item. Now, we then place the user task inside that list item using the text content. And at this stage, this element only exists in memory. And that is why we are using console.log to confirm it, to see that it has been created successfully. Because if we look closely at what we just did, you can see that this task is actually not being shown or listed on the web page, but JavaScript understands it and it is being captured inside the memory of our application. And that is why we are able to access it here in the console. So far, so good. This lesson has taught us that the create element method can be used to create a new HTML element in JavaScript. The element it creates exists in memory and it won't appear on the web page until we add it to the document.